Hey everyone, welcome back. You ready for this? This one's heavy. We're diving into the plane crash in Philly. 7 lives lost. An entire neighborhood shaking.
Right.
Just a total tragedy. We're looking at January 31st, Friday evening. A medical transport plane goes down near the Roosevelt Mall.
Yeah.
It was just a routine flight.
Yeah. It was a medical transport flight. And that's where the real mystery starts, right? These medical flights are often Learjet 55s, like this one was.
Right.
They take off from Northeast Philly Airport all the time. So the crew, they likely knew this route, like the back of their hand.
Yeah.
So what in those few minutes after takeoff could turn something routine into a tragedy?
It's like everything's normal and then suddenly, boom.
Yeah.
The NTSB report, even in its early stages, is giving us some clues, though.
Right. So they're saying the plane hit about 1,500 feet.
Okay.
Made some turns, and then a steep descent.
Oh, wow.
The impact was brutal. It scattered debris for blocks. That alone makes the investigation tougher. A lot tougher than if the plane had stayed relatively intact.
Okay. But they're looking for the cockpit voice recorder, right?
Yes.
That's got to help, like the black box they always talk about in movies.
It's a crucial piece of the puzzle, for sure. But just to clarify, it's not just voices they're after.
Right.
That black box actually records all sorts of flight data.
Okay.
Altitude, speed, even the conversations in the cockpit.
Gotcha.
All of which helps reconstruct those final moments. What's really strange here is that there were no signs of distress before takeoff.
Really?
Yeah. The tower didn't report anything unusual, and there was no indication from the crew that something was wrong.
So it's like a perfectly normal takeoff, and then, what, they just hit some crazy bird strike or something?
That is one of many possibilities investigators are considering. But right now, weather is a big focus.
Okay.
We know there was rain and thin cloud cover that night. Conditions that could create extremely limited visibility, even whiteout scenarios.
Whoa. Whiteout while flying. I can barely handle a little fog in my car. That must be terrifying for a pilot.
Absolutely. Those kinds of conditions demand a whole other level of skill.
Right.
And focus.
Yeah.
Though ice accumulation on the aircraft at that altitude is unlikely, sudden changes in visibility can disorient even the most experienced pilots.
Yeah, for sure. And this isn't just some cargo flight. There were people on board, families. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. Shriners Children's Hospital, where the young patient was being treated, put out a statement expressing their condolences.
It really hits you hard, especially knowing they were flying back to Mexico after treatment.
Right.
That family.
Full of hope.
Full of hope, bringing their child home.
Yeah.
And then this.
Yeah. And we can't forget the person driving on the ground, who was also killed. This crash impacted so many lives in such a profound way.
It's hard to fathom the ripple effects of a tragedy like this.
It is.
President Trump actually posted on Truth Social, expressing sorrow for the lives lost. We also saw reactions from Vice President Vance and Governor Shapiro.
Governor Shapiro went to the crash site, and he spoke about the best of Philly on display. Neighbors helping neighbors, showing incredible resilience and compassion. It's something you see often in these situations. The worst brings out the best in people.
It's amazing how a community can come together in a crisis like this. I read an account from Michael Chivone, a resident who lives nearby. He said he heard this massive bang, felt his house shake, and initially thought it was some kind of attack.
That speaks to how sudden and unexpected this was, how jolting for anyone in the area. And there's even audio captured by doorbell cameras.
Oh, wow.
Those recordings picked up the sound of the plane's engines right before the crash.
Those recordings are really chilling. You can actually hear the engines roaring, almost screaming, and then this huge explosion.
Yeah.
It gives you a sense of the sheer force of the impact.
The debris field tells a similar story. It wasn't confined to just one area. There were reports of debris flying into a nearby diner, injuring a patron. It just shows how far-reaching the consequences of these events can be.
It's a scary reminder that even something as simple as having dinner can be interrupted by tragedy. And sadly, this crash in Philly brings to mind another recent aviation disaster, that mid-air collision in Washington, D.C. just days before.
It does make you think about the inherent risks of flying, but this isn't just about bad luck. Aviation attorney John Galliano, who's spoken out about the Philly crash, stressed that uncovering the specific causes of these incidents is crucial.
So we're not just looking for a scapegoat.
No.
It's about understanding what went wrong to prevent it from happening again.
Right. And that's where the NTSB comes in.
Uh-huh.
Their investigation is all about piecing together the evidence, like a giant complex puzzle. They're looking at everything from the wreckage itself to eyewitness accounts and radar data.
And they're asking anyone with information to come forward. It sounds like they're pulling out all the stops to find out what happened in those crucial minutes.
They are. But you know what's fascinating here is that this wasn't a major commercial airliner.
Right.
These medical transport flights often operate with less scrutiny,
Huh.
less public awareness. It's almost like a hidden world within aviation.
That's a really good point. I guess we tend to focus on the big airlines, but there's this whole other sector operating with potentially different standards.
And that raises some important questions. What are the safety protocols for these companies? How rigorously are their pilots trained? Is there room for increased oversight and transparency, especially given the vital nature of their missions?
It's definitely something to think about. We often take for granted that air travel is safe, but maybe there are areas where safety measures could be tightened?
There's always room for improvement. And remember, aviation safety isn't just about the planes themselves. It's about the people involved. The pilots, the crew, the air traffic controllers. Human factors like fatigue or communication breakdowns can play a huge role in accidents.
So it's not just about mechanics and weather, it's about understanding the human element as well.
Absolutely. And the fact that this crash occurred in a densely populated area adds another layer of complexity.
Right.
When you think about the potential for collateral damage, like
Yeah.
with the diner and surrounding homes, it highlights the importance of minimizing risks in every aspect of aviation.
It's a sobering reminder that these incidents can have far-reaching consequences, affecting not just those on board,
Right.
but entire communities. And it makes you think about the families going about their Friday evening totally unaware of the tragedy about to unfold nearby. Life can change so suddenly.
It's that randomness that can be so unsettling.
Yeah.
It forces us to confront the fragility of life. But, amidst the sorrow and the devastation, there are always stories of incredible resilience and compassion that emerge.
You mean the stories of first responders,
Exact.
the neighbors, the medical professionals who all step up in times of crisis?
Exactly. Their actions remind us of the inherent good in humanity.
Right.
That even in the face of tragedy, there's this capacity for incredible kindness and courage.
It's those acts of selflessness that give you hope.
Yeah.
And while the investigation into this crash will continue, seeking answers and ways to prevent future tragedies, the healing process for those affected will be ongoing.
The families who lost loved ones, the injured, the witnesses, the community as a whole, they all have a long road ahead.
Yeah.
And their journey is a reminder to all of us to cherish our loved ones, to appreciate the moments we have, and to never take life for granted.
It's a powerful message. And as we continue our deep dive into this incident, seeking to understand the complex factors that led to this tragedy, it's important to keep those affected in our thoughts.
Right.
Their stories remind us of the very human cost of these events.
They do. And while we analyze the data, investigate the wreckage, and strive for improved safety measures, it's the human element that truly resonates. The lives lost, the lives forever changed.
It's a heavy truth to carry with us as we move forward.
It is, and it's a stark contrast to the way we usually think about aviation, isn't it?
Right.
We see those massive airliners, all the regulations, the constant monitoring. But these smaller medical transport flights, they operate in a space with significantly less public attention.
It's almost like they fly under the radar, literally and figuratively. And that makes me think about something John Galliano said.
Right.
He pointed out that the investigation into this Philly crash is going to be especially complex.
Yes.
Not just because of the debris field, but also because there's less precedent for this kind of incident.
He's right. When a major commercial jet goes down, there's a whole body of knowledge to draw from.
Right.
Decades of investigation and analysis. But with these smaller, less scrutinized operations, the investigators are often charting new territory.
So they're not just looking for answers, they're creating a roadmap for future investigations. That's a lot of pressure.
It is. And it adds a layer of urgency to their work. Because while they're piecing together what happened in this specific case, they're also setting precedents that could impact how similar incidents are handled down the line.
Wow, that's a lot to consider. But let's go back to the crash itself for a moment. I keep thinking about the person in the diner, just sitting there having dinner, and suddenly debris is flying through the window. It's a reminder of how random and unpredictable these events can be, how they can touch lives in ways we never expect.
It really drives home the point that aviation safety isn't just about the planes and the pilots. It's about the communities these planes fly over, the people on the ground who in a split second can become part of the story.
It's unsettling, to say the least. And it makes you wonder, are there things we can do as passengers or as citizens to advocate for greater safety in all areas of aviation?
That's a great question, and it's one we should all be asking ourselves. For starters, staying informed is crucial. Understanding the risks, the regulations, the ways in which we can contribute to a culture of safety, that's a powerful first step.
So knowledge is power, even when it comes to flying.
Absolutely. And beyond that, there's the power of collective action. Supporting organizations that advocate for aviation safety, pushing for stricter regulations and better training, holding airlines and regulators accountable. Those are all ways we can make a difference.
It's about being proactive, not just reactive, not waiting for another tragedy to spark change, but working to prevent it in the first place.
Exactly. And it requires a shift in mindset.
Right.
We can't just assume that flying is inherently safe.
Right.
We have to be engaged, informed, and willing to speak up for what's right.
It's a shared responsibility in a way. From the pilots to the air traffic controllers to the passengers to the communities these planes fly over. We all have a role to play in ensuring that aviation is as safe as it can possibly be.
And one thing that often gets overlooked in these discussions is the human factor. We can talk about regulations and technology all day long, but at the end of the day, it's people who are making decisions, people who are operating these machines, people who are responsible for safety.
So it's not just about checklists and procedures. It's about creating a culture where safety is truly prioritized at every level.
Precisely. It's about fostering open communication, addressing fatigue and stress, encouraging a questioning attitude where people feel empowered to speak up if they see something that seems amiss.
It's about creating a system where human error is anticipated and mitigated rather than ignored or brushed aside.
Exactly, because let's face it, humans are fallible.
Right.
We make mistakes. And in aviation, even small mistakes can have catastrophic consequences.
Which brings us back to this crash in Philly. The NTSB investigation is still ongoing, and it's likely to be months, maybe even years, before we have a definitive answer about what caused the plane to go down.
And even then, there may be lingering questions.
Right.
But what we must do is learn from this tragedy. We need to examine every piece of evidence, every factor, every contributing element, and use that knowledge to make flying safer for everyone.
It's about finding those points of intervention, those moments where we can step in and say, okay, here's how we can prevent this from happening again.
Right. It's about turning a tragedy into an opportunity for positive change, for lasting improvement.
And in the meantime, it's about holding space for the victims and their families, remembering the human cost of this crash, and acknowledging the long road to healing that lies ahead.
Well said. Because even as we delve into the technical aspects of aviation safety, we must never lose sight of the human stories at the heart of this tragedy.
It's about finding that balance, isn't it? Between seeking answers and offering compassion, between analyzing the facts and honoring the lives lost.
Exactly. And that's a challenge we all face, not just in aviation, but in any situation where we're grappling with complex issues and profound human loss.
It really makes you think about how we approach safety in general, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We often focus on the big dramatic events, but real change often comes from paying attention to those smaller, less obvious details.
That's a great point. It's like the old saying, for want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost.
Right.
You see where I'm going with this? In aviation, even seemingly minor oversights can cascade into something much larger.
Yeah.
Something with devastating consequences.
So it's not just about preventing the next big crash, it's about creating a culture of vigilance, where every detail matters, where every potential risk is taken seriously.
Exactly. And that requires a shift in perspective, a move away from complacency and towards a more proactive approach to safety.
Which brings me to a question that's been swirling in my mind.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about the NTSB investigation, the technical aspects of the crash, the human factors involved.
Right.
But what about the emotional impact?
Yeah.
How do we even begin to process a tragedy like this?
That's a crucial question. And it's one that often gets overlooked in these discussions. We tend to focus on the facts, the data, the search for answers.
Right.
But the emotional toll of an event like this is immense, not just for the families directly affected, but for the entire community, for anyone who's ever stepped on a plane.
It shakes our sense of security, our belief that we're safe in the skies.
Absolutely. And it forces us to confront our own mortality, our own vulnerability. It's a reminder that life is precious, that it can change in an instant.
And how do we reconcile that knowledge with our need to keep living, to keep moving forward?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Finding a way to honor the victims, to acknowledge the pain and the loss, while also finding the strength to carry on.
It's a delicate balance, for sure.
It is. And it looks different for everyone. Some people find solace in faith and community and acts of service. Others find it in art, in music, in connecting with nature. There's no right or wrong way to grieve, to heal, to find meaning in the midst of tragedy.
But what I keep coming back to is the idea of hope. Even in the darkest of times, even when faced with unimaginable loss, there's this flicker of hope that persists.
And that's what we need to hold on to. That belief that even though things may never be the same, even though the pain may never fully go away, we can find a way to move forward, to build something better, to honor the memories of those we've lost by working to prevent future tragedies.
It's about turning our grief into action, our sorrow into a force for positive change.
Exactly. And that's where I find hope. In the collective will to learn from these experiences, to make flying safer, to create a world where tragedies like this become less and less frequent.
It's a long road ahead, but it's a journey we must take together.
And it starts with each of us, with our willingness to engage,
Right.
to ask questions, to demand better, to never stop striving for a future where the skies are truly safe for everyone.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned. We've explored the complexities of the Philly plane crash, delved into the technical and human factors at play, and grappled with the emotional weight of this tragedy. But more importantly, we've acknowledged the need for action, for change, for a collective commitment to making aviation safer for all.
And let's not forget the human stories at the heart of this event. The families who lost loved ones, the first responders who risked their lives, the community that came together to offer support and comfort.
Yeah.
Their experiences remind us of the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of hope in the face of adversity.
So to our listeners, I leave you with this. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged. Because even though the skies may seem vast and unknowable, we all have a role to play in ensuring that they remain a safe passage for all who journey among the clouds. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.